So Bill, thank you so much for being here. And I have to say, when I first heard about the book, and heard that you were writing a book, I was excited about it for the reasons that I talked about. But I went back and watched the UT Austin presentation. And I thought, I'm even more excited about it now. Then when I read the book, I was just amazed, like how many years between then and now, and it feels like it must have been pretty much a full-time job during that time writing this book.
It was about 6 years, or yeah, the project. So the history of the thing is, I was at a point in my career, I was reading some biographies. I read these three and noticed these through lines, and it was when I was blogging actively, and I wrote down notes just as I would for any one of my blog posts, but it wasn't really related to the venture world. And I got invited to do this speech at the MBA program at McCombs, and I said to the dean, can I use this? He said, sure. And so then that went on YouTube, and people started seeing it. Both people whose life it impacted, but also James Clear saw it as an example, the author of Atomic Habits, and he started talking about it. And then I was at this strange event that Chris Sacca actually had put on, where he invites a bunch of random people that don't know each other. And this one guy, he just kept prodding. It wasn't just me, he prodded everyone. He said, what have you done that's creative? Like just literally pushing. And finally I said, well, I have this presentation. And like that night he went and watched it, and he says, you have to write a book. And he just wouldn't get out of my head. And so he probably deserves the most credit for pushing me to go do this. And then the other side project, or the other side thing to know is, over the years I became kind of a huge fanboy of well done, high quality nonfiction writing for reasons I can't explain, just like a hobby. And through that, got to know Gladwell and Lewis and some of
fiction,
and studied their work.
High quality.
There's a book called The New Journalism. So once I decided to do this creative thing, I took it very seriously. And so the structure of the book's fairly unique intentionally. Yes. The storytelling in the narratives of the profiles was intentional.
Right.
Like there's a lot of intentionality that went into it.
And you also got a co-author or a co-writer.
I did.
And did you think when you took on this undertaking that it was going to take as much time and as much commitment? No. So
partly my co-writer, the co-writer, there was this article that I encourage everyone to read called The Greatest Bowling Story Ever that I had read. It was in D Magazine in Dallas in I forget what year, 2008, and I had read it, and I told you I was a fanboy of nonfiction writing, so I had read this thing, and I forwarded it to everyone, and one day I met this guy. I said, "You're the guy that wrote that," and he said, "You're the guy that gave that speech at Texas on the," those were the first two things we said, and then it turned out that the way I wanted the profiles to read, he does a ton of work for the Atlantic. Like many Atlantic articles, each one of them, maybe a full Atlantic article. So anyway, that's how that happened. But we ended up chatting a lot on Zoom and and the project kind of expanded.
Got bigger and bigger. And you kept on putting more and more resources into it. I mean, you talk about the career regret survey that you did, and then.
So we started to wonder how many people might have missed out on what they should have been doing with their life. And we did a SurveyMonkey survey and asked, if you could start your career over again, how many of would you want to do over? And 70% of the college people said they would want to start over. And then we did it again and expanded it, and then we did it with Wharton just to really solidify.
To make it official.
And along the way, we also went and read everything we possibly could in the industry and all the work of all the famous authors in the industry. And Daniel Pink had written this book on regrets, The Power of Regrets. And he had studied regrets across multiple countries, different cultures, And the number one thing people regret at the end of their lives is what he calls boldness regrets. They're regrets of inaction. So humans are remarkably good at forgiving themselves for mistakes they make. I learned something, no big deal, moved on. But the thing that you can't get out of your brain is that thing you always told yourself you were supposed to do that you didn't do.
Sounds a little bit like the concept of loss aversion in behavioral
No doubt.
economics, right?
Yeah, absolutely, very similar. But he even has graphs. You can probably find them, but like it gets worse. Like as you get older, this regret of inaction like takes up more of your brain space.
And when you looked at career regret, talk about conveyor belt careers and how like today we think about how wired people are from the time they're.
I'm fairly convinced, and I didn't dwell on this in the book, but I'm fairly convinced that the modern path from say 6th grade through college graduation has evolved in a way that's non-helpful for people stumbling upon what they're fascinated by. And I'm not the only one that's talked about that. Jonathan Haidt's talked about that. He has a chapter in Coddling of the American Mind called The Resume Arms Race. And it's so hard to get into college, we start thinking about that as parents when you're in the 6th grade. Yeah. And lacrosse lessons and cello lessons and Mandarin lessons and volunteer work. And like the activity calendar of a young adult or a child these days is so overscheduled compared to when we grew up.
Right.
And you were just out roaming around.
When we grew up, it was like, get out of the house, I'm locking the door, you're not coming home till 6. And my mom, today, if a mother sent their kid out of the house and locked the door, you'd have CPS showing up at her house.
And there's some really interesting work, once again, that Haidt's talked about, where we're overprotective of their physical life and know very little about their online life.
Right.
Which is a different problem.
Which is terrifying.
Unrelated to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we forced kids into this meat grinder, and you start learning to perform. Angela Duckworth was asked recently, she said if I could rewrite her book over again, she said it was 50% passion and 50% perseverance. And she said she'd probably weighted way more on the passion side because she's met all these kids, and she teaches at Wharton. She said, we met all these kids who have learned to grind. So they've learned how to just get in there and roll through academic work. But if it doesn't come with any innate fascination, I did a TED Talk recently, which will be out on June 8th. But I talk about the fact that when you're fascinated with something, the learning is free. Like you study things for fun. Like you get done reading it, you go, you want to tell somebody, you're excited, you get energy. When you study things you don't want to be studying, they sap energy. You get tired. You're like, I need a break. And you got to get up and take a break. And that contrast is massive, because if you can get your career aligned with something that you're fascinated with, you're going to have this massive unfair advantage where the continuous learning is just going to be
easy,
effortless.
Right.
It might even give you excitement.
And parents they're not ill-meaning. I mean, they have your best interest at heart. They want you to have a successful job.
It's not just parents. It's parents, advisors, teachers, counselors. I've even taught, as I've been promoting the book, I often sit down with career counselors at these universities. And I'll tell you a very funny story, because we're going to get into some of these topics. But I was explaining to this one, where was I? I was at the University of Chicago, I think. And I explained to her what the book was about. It was before it had come out. And she says, it's an odd thing for a college counselor. She goes, that'll work for some fields, but not what about English poetry? How could that work for them? And I'm like, well, you're the one giving them the degree. I don't know why you're pushing back. But and then I opened the book and I showed her these two examples. One is a guy who fell in love with the Grand Canyon, and turned it into a career. And another was a guy who fell in love with Texas horticulture and turned it into a career. They're both profiled in the book. And I showed it to her and I said, well, these are, I don't know how much different they are than English poetry. She goes, but I bet those two people worked really hard. I'm like, yes, that is a requirement.
Yeah, it's one of the things that struck me throughout the book. And to your point, when you're doing something you love, the hard work actually doesn't feel like hard work, and you can do it. You can grind for 10 years, but then you're going to lose steam at some point. But there is no substitute for grinding, for actually working really hard.
And in the TED Talk, this isn't in the book, but I also realized the other unfair thing that happens when you're fascinated by something is everyone notices. So when you talk about it, you get excited, and you're studying the nuance of the field and the edge of the field. And so when you're talking about it and you're talking about, and I just found out this and I just found out, people are like, boy, that kid really cares about that subject matter. And then when like opportunities come your way because someone said, oh, you're interested in Spanish architecture, Joey, that's like all he's ever studied. And then you start introducing people that direction, like job opportunities, everything comes at you because you're known as this person with this massive fascination. And so it just gets easier. Everything just gets easier.
So let me ask you a question. And I was thinking in the dedication to the book, you dedicate it to your wife, but you have children, and your children are now sort of college, post-college,
yes.
Right? Did you write it partially for them? Because I'm sure as a father, you were giving them advice.
They wouldn't want me to answer that question. I think, actually, I'm going to see one of my sons later tonight, and he asked me to bring him 10 copies. So,
okay, so that means he gets 10,
for
right?
his students, so this is interesting. I mean, because this relates to the subject of the book and the TED Talk. He's a Mechie from Carnegie Mellon. He interned at Logitech and Tesla, but after that second summer, he came to his mother and I and said he wanted to be a school teacher.
That's awesome.
And so he entered Teach for America. He's teaching nearby.
That is awesome.
And he was TAing, and he said he got 2 compliments one day, one for being a good TA and teaching, and one for being a good engineer. And he said one felt 10 times better than the other.
That's awesome.
So
that's really good. My second child, so my first is a sophomore, my second's a freshman. The freshman is a business degree, which every white boy in America gets a business degree. That's just the way it goes. But he is the last person in the world to be, to go into business. And I tell him all the time, I think he'd really like to be a teacher. I think he should really think about that because it's just his personality.
But I would say, because in the epilogue is my story, and I did 2 different careers before I got into venture.
So that was my next.
Yeah. So I'll pause on that point.
No, that's exactly where we're going.
For young people, I would say it's perfectly fine to not know, to not have this. I don't know what percentage of people at age 18 know exactly what they're fascinated by. And the entire chapter titled "Chase Your Curiosity" has tons of different exercises, many borrowed from some of the best in this field, on how to kind of wander around and learn and experiment with other things. And I think it's perfectly fine to not know, and I think it's highly useful to know whatever you're doing is not it.
Right.
So you can keep moving.
So let's go through your career, because you did make several, 3 different changes. CS at University of Florida, and you end up at Compaq, which, Compaq in 1989 was, tech in 1989 was a fraction of the size tech is in the global economy today. But it's probably not understating the case that Compaq in 1989 was the Anthropic of today.
Yes, it was hot.
It was hot. So you were hired by the hot company.
Yeah.
And you stayed there for a while and said, the hot thing isn't for me.
Yeah, I was, and I want to be careful about how I present this because I think it's very specific to me. I, as a practicing engineer, we started the 3rd computer project. Back then, PCs were known for the Intel processor inside of them. So there'd be a new Intel processor, you'd have a new PC. Anyway, the third one looked a lot like the second and looked a lot like the first. And I was like, man, I don't know that like I want to do 20 of these, right? Because it's gonna, get a little mundane. And I asked myself, do I see myself doing this 30 years from now? And I think it's a good test. I don't think that's in the book, but it's like in retrospect, that's what I was doing. And I could go see and meet and talk to people that were in their late 50s that had been an engineer their whole life, and with no judgment against, it may have been quite fulfilling for them, but I could say, is this what I want to be? And I got to a no. It also turns out that at night at home, I had stumbled on this book, One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch. I had opened a Prodigy account. I was trading stocks, at home.
Online.
At night.
Right.
Well, you can't trade at night, but I was researching stocks at home. And so I think there are clues in your hobbies. There are clues in what you choose to do with your spare time.
Well, and as an undergrad, and this is one of the great things for, you're a year or two out of undergrad, the easy thing to do then is to go to graduate school and make a complete pivot on your career.
Right.
So
And that's what I did.
You chose to do that.
Yes.
And
I had been reading the trade rags because I was in the business, and I could see that there was software, there was other parts of the stack. I was interested. I had fallen in love with Borland's turbo products back then, was
Turbo
coding
Pascal,
with
right.
them, and they went public while I was working there, and I bought the stock. So business was fascinating to me. So I got an MBA, and I attacked business school in a proactive manner. Like, what am I going to get out of this? Like, I'm paying for it. Like I'm choosing to do this.
Right.
They owe me. Mm-hmm. And I was going to
spending a lot of money for it.
I'm going to suck as much information out of it as I possibly, which is not how I attack undergrad.
And what you talk in the book about how you, in graduate school, you all of a sudden started to become a reader.
Yes.
Like, how does that happen?
I don't know how that happened.
Can I put that in my kids?
I don't know what happened. I had not been much of a reader at all up until that point in time. And I had read One Up on Wall Street, and I had read a couple other things like that. But when I got to business school, it just flipped. I don't know if that's ever happened to anyone else.
So then, and you can tell the story, but you go to then
I toyed with the idea of venture. I mean, if you think about it,
did you know what a venture capitalist was?
Well, I did a little
1991?
bit, but yes. I mean, Dore was on the board of Compaq, believe it or not.
Oh yeah,
And
what's his name?
My sister had started there 4 years earlier and had options, and so I kind of started to understand this game a little bit.
Right.
And I met with a couple. I did like the coffee. Oh, can I get a coffee? And they told me go work for 20 years. I'm like, no, that's not very helpful. And anyway, I'll try and speed it up. But along the same time, because I was interested in tech and business, I was reading Fortune and Forbes in the Journal, and there was this team at Goldman Sachs of sell-side analysts, Dan Benton and Rick Sherlin. They were just quoted all the time. And I was like, that's pretty cool. They're studying the industry, and people view them as experts. So I went to New York and knocked on doors and begged for that job.
And amazingly, so you get that job.
I did get that job.
And then through sheer force of will and a little bit of luck, you become the tech analyst.
And by the way, in getting that job, there's a concept in the book I have that I call "Make Yourself a Candidate of One." I think the best jobs for you to really thrive are ones where you go and create the opportunity yourself. I think the odds that you're going to thrive in a job where you waited until someone had a wreck, or the worst for me possible in my brain, this was part of why I wrote the book, is the college job interview through the career office where you're lined up 20 people, 15 minutes each. Like, how are you going to differentiate yourself in that, type of situation? And what are the odds that your dream company and your dream career happens to be interviewing at your school? Like, it's near zero, right?
Near
like,
zero.
It's less than 5%, unless you intentionally went to some school. Anyway, so I think you can make yourself a candidate of one. And I think almost nearly everyone that breaks into venture does that, because there are no bulletin boards for venture jobs.
Well, and I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. I get asked the question all the time. How can I get a job in venture? And my answer, I'm curious. Do you have a pat answer? I have a pat answer, but do you have?
So I 15 years ago wrote a 4-page PDF letter to answer that question, and I would just send it to people when they asked. And near the last 25%, I'd say, if you want my help, do these 15 things and then come back to me. And like only 2 people ever
came back
through that. But when I was doing one of these in Boston at MIT, I was having this conversation. I said, a bunch of kids kept asking me for the letter afterwards, so I posted it.
Okay.
So I posted it on my Twitter account like 5 weeks ago, the whole letter.
I'm going to go read that.
I don't think you need to.
Well, I mean, I don't need to, but I will.
To take you back anyway, so then I get this job as a sell-side analyst, and it's fabulous. It's so fascinating. You're 28, 29, and you get to meet with CEOs and CFOs. I ended up covering Compaq on Wall Street and Dell, and met Michael, and it was such a blast. But yet again, 3 years in, one night, I remember like it was yesterday, in Wall Street, when you're that age, you're working. I'd get to work at 7, 6:30, and I'd leave at 10, and I'm on our floor, Park Avenue Plaza, 36th floor, and we had the whole floor, and the 4 corner offices were the most senior analysts. And I went and did a lap, and I stopped in front of each of those offices, and I said, is this who I want to be 30 years from now? And by the time I was done with that loop, I knew this wasn't it. Despite how much fun I had and how much access I had. And so I didn't quit the next day. Oh, I'm out of here. I started planning for the next move.
So one question for you about sort of taking the leap or taking this jump. A lot of times people are terrified, like they don't have the flexibility. I can't because I have this or I have that. I tell young people, like, minimize your obligations early on, because it maximizes your chances to take risks. But
I totally agree with that. And I was fortunate. I kind of grew up with parents that taught me to be frugal, and so I never got out of. I worked with tons of young people on Wall Street that immediately got the house in the Hamptons and like the membership club, and they were stuck like right away.
When I
nervous about bonuses, shit like I never had to worry about it.
When I first got onto the startup side, the first company I was CEO of, one of my board members was talking about hiring a VP of sales. And he said one of the things with salespeople is you hire them, they spend all the money that they make, because that's what salespeople do. So you want to make sure that they're driven by their commissions.
Yes.
So it's the...
In that case, I understand.
Yeah. I've got the big car payment, the everything else. So the principles that you had, back to the UT Austin presentation, the principles you had in the UT Austin presentation, you added a few.
One main one that we added, yeah.
And was that from your research? Was that from doing more of these profiles and sort of picking things up, or was it just the brainstorming, we're missing something here?
So the one that was added was go to the epicenter, and my co-writer and my editor felt very strongly about it. And I had debated it a bit because it's a big commitment for someone to make, to just pick up and move, And so they eventually talked me into it. I'm very glad they did. Many of the people that have read the book are most enamored by that chapter, and so I'm glad they pushed me on it. And the more I've thought about it, like it's actually very real. If your industry has an epicenter, and we're sitting in an epicenter, but and you are confident this is your fascination lane, you should go. Because all the other principles in the book get better. So I talk about continuous learning, I talk about finding mentors, I talk about finding peers. Like all those things in the epicenter happen continuously. And then the big one, the big kicker, which relates to what I said earlier about being noticeably fascinated, optionality comes out of nowhere. And so almost any famous person's story you read, they have 2 or 3 of these things, and then lightning struck because all this stuff lined up. And I have several of those in my career. But when you're in that place, the odds of that happening are 20x, 100x, because you're just, you could be in a coffee shop tomorrow with someone that matters, and it's all the time.
You're increasing the surface area of serendipity.
Of luck, no
Right.
doubt, no doubt whatsoever.
Right.
Yes, and then one of the amazing things about many of the epicenters, my favorite thing in retrospect about Silicon Valley is how approachable so many different people are, and how willing people are to share advice and give help. I think for people that are in finance in New York, they're like, what? I don't think they understand. It's really different. It's very special. But
it does require a certain. I mean, I think it was more that way when I first came out here, and it's less that way now as it has gotten more and more crowded over time.
Yeah.
But if you do the work, if you to your point, if you show up as an interested person, you show that you have interest in the history, like all the other things that you talk about, and you really appreciate that, then people are definitely willing to give you the time.
Yeah. And the reason people don't do it is they're intimidated by competition, which I think is just a mistake. You should get over that. Or some people are they have this idea that I'm going to be a big fish in a small pond. And I think that's okay, but you need to go to the epicenter for 10 years and learn and hone the craft, and then go be the big fish in the small pond. You miss out on too much learning and connections and networking along the way.
Your story of Bob Dylan really puts a point on that, even though it wasn't.
It might be, if those of you, they didn't spend enough time on it in the movie, but he hitchhiked from Minneapolis to New York so he could meet Woody Guthrie. It's a combination of be at the epicenter and mentor,
but you draw
aggressive mentor seeking that probably no one else has really come close to.
And back to the, I guess they're snowplow parents. There aren't too many parents who would let their kid hitchhike at 18 years old with $15 in their pocket from Minneapolis to New York.
I mean, one of the reasons the book took so long is I intentionally left out any success story that involved bankers or doctors or lawyers or consultants or any of these professions your parents would push you towards, because I wanted to give more people kind of broader freedom to believe in things that were more bespoke.
The point I was thinking about with the Bob Dylan story was, you talked at one point in the book how after he had only been there for a year, he came back and his skill level was eons above what it had been before.
Yeah. He went back to Minneapolis and people were like, they didn't know who he was.
Right. Who is this guy and where did this talent come from?
Because he had been in the middle of Greenwich Village performing daily and hanging out with way more talented people than he was in Minneapolis.
And learning from them.
Yes, no doubt.
Right. So of the 6 principles, it might be impossible, but is there a favorite?
There is a favorite of mine. It might not be to you. I really love this chapter we wrote called "Embrace Your Peers," because I think the reason I like it so much is I think all the other things, people could say, oh, that's been covered before. Continuous learning, find mentors. But I don't think the peer thing's been exposed enough. Although I think Angela Duckworth has a book coming out that's going to talk about it. But 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 there's something really powerful that happens if you can find 4 or 6 people that are on your same rung of the ladder, on the exact same journey, and lock arms together and like support each other, co-learn together, share your network, and it can be really powerful. And I have some amazing stories in the book of people that did that, but it's non-intuitive. I have, in the companies I've worked with, I've tried to push the CEOs to get their direct reports to go do this and report back, and it's very foreign to a lot of people. I think they worry about sharing competitive information. I think they, I don't know what, but the people that do it, and there are, it's very common in founder networks actually. Like everyone encourages a founder to go. You got to find 4 or 5 other people doing it.
That are doing the same
job's
thing.
too lonely. You really need to. So it is. It's more common here, but you can do it in any role. You can do it in any role. Yeah.
Yeah. That is, for what it's worth, my favorite chapter as well. And
cool.
It's my favorite chapter because I think about, and today it's so much easier than it was when we were coming out of college, because there was no text thread and this sort of thing, and you had to call people or email them, or generally proximity mattered a lot.
Yeah.
And now you can have a group of peers that can be in very different places and don't actually see each other.
So you could be on a Reddit group.
Exactly, or it could be on a Reddit group. To me, it really, you talked about the principle of finite games versus infinite games, and with careers as infinite games, when you're sort of supporting each other and everything else, you're doing that with that peer group. You're cheering each other's successes, you're lifting them up when they're down,
Yeah, I think a lot of people learn about being competitive in sports. And in a lot of sports, it is a zero-sum game. There's one winner, a bunch of losers, and it can teach you this kind of me against the world kind
finite
of thing.
Game thing, right?
And in most careers, downhill ski racing's not one of them, but in all the others, there's so many winners. I mean, how many great founders are there? How many great venture? And so like being overly protective it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And ideas are a dime a dozen, like they really are. So you might as well co-learn. And the support thing really matters too. Yeah.
Well, because when you do in your career hit those inevitable bumps, which we all are going to, in that peer group, you'll have somebody else who's hit the same thing before.
I'll steal a story from the book. So Jimmy Donaldson, at age 17, hated school, didn't want to pay attention to school, didn't want to go to school, but he loved YouTube. And he was trying to figure out how to be better at the game of YouTube. And he met 3 other people that were on that same journey. And they claim, this is probably an overstatement, but they claim they were on Skype together 16 hours a day for 4 years. And they shared everything they learned together.
That's more than 10,000 hours.
Yes, and they learned, and he said on Joe Rogan that they got 40,000 hours, kind of making light of the Gladwell thing, but just 4 times 10, because they shared everything they learned together, and all of them became millionaires. And he said if a 5th person chosen randomly from the human population had been on the Skype call, they'd have made $1 million also, just because it was so greenfield at that moment. Jimmy Donaldson's Mr. Beast, for those that don't know.
But that, to your first principle, which is, find your passion or find the thing that, your curiosity. If you didn't love YouTube videos, you're not spending 16 hours,
you're not.
16 hours a day working on it.
You're not. But they did.
They
It worked out for them.
They did. So, what is your ultimate goal for the book? I mean, if you change trajectory of 1 or 2 lives, are you wanting to be the sort of Uncle Richard in a number of people's stories, or is there?
Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed about people that find this fascination lane is they leave a massive impact on their field. And so he's referring to Uncle Richard, which is, there's the first story in the book, Danny Meyer. Danny Meyer's on a path to be a lawyer. He undergrad poli-sci, Like, he had told his family he's going to be a lawyer, and that's what he was going to do. And the night before he's going to take the LSATs, out to dinner with his Uncle Richard. And his Uncle Richard goes, "Why are you so down?" He goes, "I have to take the LSAT tomorrow. I don't want to." And his Uncle Richard's like, Why do you have to? Like, you really have to? And anyway, over this dinner, his Uncle Richard talks him into opening a restaurant. And he takes the LSAT, never applies to law school, and he becomes Danny Meyer, who is one of the biggest restaurateurs of all time. And without that intervention, maybe he's a lawyer, and if you look at his impact, I mean, the thousands and thousands of people that have worked under Danny Meyer, they wear it like a badge of honor. Like, they're so proud of having been in one of his restaurants, and all the customers. Then he wrote a book. Like, look at the footprint. And so if I can help unlock that kind of human potential by just giving people the courage and permission to go chase this thing, that's pretty cool. There's a guy that watched the original video, a guy named Dan Casey, you can look him up, who was a school teacher who just loved football, and he particularly liked offensive plays. And he would chart them for fun as a hobby. And he had started to build a digital database. He saw that talk and launched a website. He's got a Twitter handle, he's got 150,000. He has an app you can download. He's full-time now doing this thing. Pro analysts quote him, and he's loving life. And he sent me these notes to thank me, and that's pretty cool.
So each of those stories, you're identifying someone who had.
If I do 100 of those, I'd be elated. If it's more than that, all the better.
So each of those people, in some way, they knew what their passion was.
Yeah.
For young people, early in their career, you're in college, you're immediately post-college. How can they identify their passion?
So there's a whole chapter just dedicated to that. So I'll give some answers, but I'll leave out some. I really aggregated there's 6 different exercises you can go do. First, know if you're not there. That's very valuable. So you can look elsewhere. Angela Duckworth says, wander with a purpose, and just move towards things that are more interesting to you. Even within a company, if you see something, you're doing one thing, you see something you like more, try and get more exposure to it. In some bigger companies, you can raise your hand and job transfer. It happens all the time. Dan Gilbert, who's one of the 2 people on the Acquired podcast, he had an idea he called a side hustle. So at every company he went to, he would say, "Can I do this on the side in my spare time on the weekend?" And 1, the employers always said yes. 2, it made him look resourceful and proactive. One of those he did at Microsoft. He created Microsoft Garage, which was kind of a reinvention of their outreach to the startup community. Through that, Madrona Ventures offered him a job. So the side hustle created this new opportunity. He got to Madrona and said, "As a side hustle, do you mind if I start a podcast?" You can see where this went. And now Acquired, I think some people say it makes more money than any other podcast out there. And the 2 of them, once again, tickled pink to be alive. So happy.
Love what they're doing.
To be doing this every day. And so anyway, those are just some examples. I think you just keep moving around.
You had one thing that you talked about in the book.
But there's read.
The read thing, that's exactly what I was going to say. But the thing that was really interesting to me, the point that you made, which is obviously spot on, if you're reading about the space you're in and you find it's boring, well, then you're in the wrong space.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right. Yeah, I challenge everyone to read about the history of their field. Because there was this famous moment at this chess tournament in Iceland where they did a trivia contest in the middle of it, and Magnus Carlsen won the trivia contest. And so, he doesn't mind reading about the history of chess. And I don't think he ever said, "I'm going to read about the history of chess to get better at it." He read about it because he was fascinated by it. So yeah, study the history, and if you don't like that, then you're not in the.
That should.
But books can be disinhibiting. Jerry Seinfeld read a book called The Last Laugh. Someone had profiled 14 pro comics, and I don't think he knew that it was a legitimate field. And that's another reason I put all the stories in there. You read about this and it becomes disinhibiting. You're like, oh, I could go. It becomes more realistic. You could start to imagine yourself. One thing I've come up with that I don't even think I put in the book, but since then out talking about it, you could use AI and just imagine yourself in a career for a week. Like, because you could just talk to AI every day. So if I were in this field, you could try it on. You could do that 3 weeks in a row and then battle card how it felt. What is my daily routine going to look like? What are the types of things I'm going to be asked to do? What are the good aspects of the job? What are the bad? Like, you could literally have a conversation for a week imagining I'm going to go spend the next 5 years in this field and see how it feels.
So I'm glad you brought up AI, because obviously AI for careers and jobs is, everyone's panic level 10 or whatever. When you think about finding your dream career, and what's the risk of AI, taking over that dream career? How do you balance that? And
what I think is that so that's there. In addition to the survey work I did, we went deep on some Gallup work, and like 70% of people identify themselves as what Gallup calls quiet quitters. They're like disengaged at work. They're kind of ambivalent about it. Those people have serious risk from AI. I think people that are fascinated by what they do, high agency people, are empowered. It's like a jetpack. Mark Cuban said there are two types of people in this world: those that use LLMs to learn faster than they ever could before, and those that use LLMs to skip learning altogether. And I mean, so at this recent TED I just went to, Neil Katyal, who argued the Supreme Court case on the tariffs and won, his TED Talk, which is public, you can go watch it right now, included how he used Harvey to prepare for the Supreme Court case. And it's amazing, it's amazing. But he didn't think twice about further empowering himself. And he's one of the best lawyers out there, right? It was natural to him to extend what he's capable of that way. And what I do think is, it's helpful to be fascinated in high agency, because then you want to know what it's capable of allowing you to be, and you're naturally curious and you lean into it. The biggest problem is if you're an AI skeptic, because you're never trying to figure that out. And the truth of the matter is, humans have evolved with their tools forever. If I ask you to compete with a farmer that has modern farming equipment, and I give you a shovel and a hoe and an oxen, there's zero chance you're going to be competitive.
Right.
And so this is the next tool. It's like, you have a PC, you have the Office suite, you use email. Now you need this, and you have to know what it's capable of in your field on the edge. And the only way to know that is to be in it.
I think of it as turbocharging human potential.
It could lead to more inequality, just because you need to be high agency to go do it. You have to want to go push the limit. Every one of the principles in here is accelerated by AI. You could never learn faster, connect easier, find mentors, learn about mentors, everything you could possibly, this book could have existed 50 years ago, and it'd be the same, I think. Right. It's pretty...
Well, and prepare, when you meet these people, preparing for them. You're going to meet somebody, you can actually have a long conversation with the AI about the person you're going to meet.
Unbelievably long.
Right.
Yes.
And then when they meet you, they want to help you more because you actually have some context and you care.
No, but everything we recommend is way easier today than it would have been 50 years ago because of all these tools.
Can you share a little bit about your foundation that you're setting up?
Yes. So I don't remember exactly when in the in the book launch, but I decided to create the Running Down a Dream Foundation to give micro grants to people that know what they're fascinated in and want to go tilt at it, but might need a little help to get going in that right direction. And so we'll see. We're going to open it up for applications in 2 weeks, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of learning in the first year.
Interesting that you put so many years into doing this, and you're taking all the profits from it, and they're going into the foundation.
Yeah.
And
and I put even more in on top of it.
Well, and so not only will people's lives be changed by reading the book, but hopefully the proceeds of the book will change even more lives.
It'll be a learning journey.
Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you.